Ever wondered if patriarchy is more than just an attitude? What if it's an actual economic system with roots buried deep in the material world? Well, today we're going to trace the story of a pretty radical idea that suggested just that: British materialist feminism. So I want you to just keep this question in your head as we go. What really happens when you stop seeing women's oppression as just a bunch of bad ideas and you start analyzing it as a concrete system with real-world material structures holding it up? This is the exact question a group of thinkers in Britain started to ask. And their answer? It led to this incredibly powerful new framework, the meeting of feminism and materialism. And listen, this wasn't just some academic exercise. This was about forging a totally new lens to understand and ultimately to change the world. So what is it exactly? Well, materialist feminist criticism is basically a school of thought that insists on connecting feminist issues to tangible, real-world stuff: economics, social structures, and the ideologies that keep them all going. It yanks the conversation away from the purely abstract and plants it firmly in the concrete world that we all actually live in. Okay, so every big idea has its pioneers, right? Let's meet the two key architects who really laid the groundwork for this entire way of thinking and see how they built its foundations. First up, we have Juliet Mitchell. Her big, groundbreaking move was to take two of the most powerful analytical tools of the 20th century, Marxism and psychoanalysis, and smash them together to understand the roots of women's oppression. You can really see her whole intellectual journey right here. She kicks things off in 1966 with this incredible essay using core Marxist concepts like production and property to pick apart patriarchy. But she realized that wasn't the whole story. So later, she brought in Freudian psychoanalysis to understand how our gender identities are actually formed within these material systems. I mean, what a truly ambitious synthesis. So our next key thinker is Michelle Barrett, and she really built on this foundation. While Mitchell was busy integrating Marx and Freud, Barrett was focused on culture. She was formulating what she called a materialist aesthetics, which is basically a way to analyze how our economic conditions literally shape our ideas about gender, beauty, and art. In her super influential 1980 book, Women's Oppression Today, Barrett just drilled down into three core concepts that she saw as absolutely central to understanding women's position in society. And those were patriarchy, reproduction, and ideology. Let's break those down. Right, so these three concepts, they became the pillars of her entire analysis. And honestly, they are absolutely key to grasping the whole materialist feminist project. First, patriarchy. For materialist feminists, this isn't just about some prejudiced attitudes. No, it's a tangible structure, a system that's literally woven into our economic and social lives, and it dictates who has power and who doesn't. Second, reproduction. Now, this is a brilliant concept because it means two things at once. Yeah, it's about biological reproduction, the family unit, but it's also about how society socially reproduces gender norms and roles over and over, generation after generation, all to serve a specific economic system. And third, ideology. You can think of this as the software that runs on the hardware of all those material structures. It's the whole system of beliefs, often centered on the family and the home, that makes all this oppression seem totally normal, natural, just the way things are supposed to be. And this quote from Michelle Barrett just ties it all together so perfectly. She argues that women's oppression isn't caused by just one thing, but by this whole network of interlocking systems, starting with the very organization of our households. So Barrett breaks it down for us into four key areas. First, the economic setup of the household and the ideas that prop it up. Second, the way labor is divided, both at home and in the workplace. Third, the education system, which helps reproduce all these roles. And finally, the state itself, which reinforces everything through laws and policies. See, it's a complete interlocking system. Now, these ideas from Mitchell and Barrett, they didn't just exist in a vacuum. They sparked a huge conversation that grew into a full-fledged intellectual and political movement. You can actually see the momentum building right here on this timeline. From Mitchell's initial essay in '66, you get the formation of the UK Marxist Feminist Collective a decade later, a group dedicated to pushing these ideas forward. Then comes Barrett's major work in 1980, and then even more scholarship in '85. It's a really clear picture of an idea catching fire. And the conversation just blew up. Critics like Newton and Rosenfeld pushed for deeper economic analysis. Thinkers like Rosalind Coward helped sharpen the core theory.
It was even applied to completely new fields, with Catherine Belsey using this lens to analyze Renaissance literature. And this growth was really powered by collaborative groups like that UK Marxist feminist collective. So, after all this theory, why does any of this matter today? What's the big takeaway from this whole intellectual story?
If you remember just one thing, let it be this. The lasting legacy of British materialist feminism is its powerful insistence that feminist concerns have to be connected to the real-world economic and social structures that create inequality in the first place. It's a call to connect our ideas to the material reality of people's lives.
And that leaves us with one final question for you to think about. In our world today, with gig work, global supply chains, and digital economies, just how relevant is a materialist lens for understanding the inequality we all face right now? Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining me.